Manchester United agree a deal worth £60 million with Chelsea for midfielder Mason Mount.
Hello, good evening. Welcome to the Transfer Show as United make a breakthrough in their quest for a midfielder. Plenty to come tonight. Mark McAdam and European football expert Andy Brassel are with us for the latest news and analysis.
Yeah, we'll also discuss Liverpool's summer plans and take an in-depth look at RB Leipzig midfielder Dominic Solanke and Tottenham target Edmund Tapsoba as well.
We're also live at the Emirates for the latest on Declan Rice as Mikel Arteta lines up a summer spending spree that could exceed £200 million.
And we'll hear from Tottenham's new £40 million signing, James Maddison.
I'm absolutely thrilled. I feel like I've got a good understanding of Tottenham Hotspur Football Club, and now I'm a part of it, and I've got this lovely white shirt on, the iconic Tottenham shirt, and it feels brilliant, and I'm ready to go.
Right, but we're going to start with Manchester United. And Mark, look, they were in, they were out. They have finally agreed a fee. Just bring us right up to date with Mason Mount.
Yeah, this transfer window delivers and delivers and delivers, doesn't it? It's so exciting to see the twists and turns. And Mason Mount, an England international who's been coveted by Manchester United throughout the course of this window, finally Manchester United have got their man. I think you have to go back to last Friday, the 23rd of June, where Manchester United had two offers rejected by Chelsea for Mason Mount. But they were quite clever because on that third offer, they said, well, we'll just leave that on the table. That offer will stand. Even though it's been rejected, we will leave that there. And at that point, Chelsea went back to Manchester United and said, well, let's get around the table and negotiate. So what happened then was that offer remained on the table. Saturday, Sunday, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, and then this afternoon.
Sounds like a Craig David song this month.
Absolutely. I never get the chance to chill during a transfer window. But in the last few hours, it got confirmed that Manchester United had agreed a deal with Chelsea for Mason Mount. It's £55 million guaranteed, with £5 million in additional add-ons for the 24-year-old that was entering his final year in his Chelsea contract. He'd been at the Bridge since he was a youngster. He'd come right through the academy. Frank Lampard gave him his debut in 2019. But this is a key target for Erik ten Hag and Manchester United. They wanted to add something to their attacking midfield options. And a 24-year-old England international, we don't really get too much better there. So, yeah, that's the development today. Significant movement from Manchester United. Chelsea raising more cash for themselves as well. But I think this will be seen as a good piece of business for Erik ten Hag.
That's an interesting point. Chelsea raising more cash. £60 million from a United perspective, a lot for a guy with 1 year left on his contract. Do you think that's a reflection that Chelsea have an owner who is happy to sit it out and wait? And if play a little bit of brinksmanship with Manchester United. If you want him, and you want him now, take it for £60 million. We're happy to let his value run down.
Well, it's a degree of brinkmanship. I mean, they needed to get it done before the end of June, because that's the end of the football financial year. And when you look at the cut-offs for financial fair play, that really matters. I mean, I think Mark's made the point elsewhere that a lot of signings will get, for that reason, announced in the first week of July that have basically already been sealed because they want them to go into the next financial year and not stack it onto what's being paid this year. So for Chelsea to make back some of that money that they spent, not just last summer, but especially in January, is incredibly important. And I wonder if, maybe if you're a Chelsea fan, you're looking at this thinking, are we becoming like Real Madrid? If you go back a couple of years, and they're very, very good at selling players with depreciating contracts who the world knows they don't want anymore, but have value elsewhere. Just because Chelsea don't want you, it doesn't mean that you won't be a great fit elsewhere. And like you said, England international. I think for that reason, Chelsea had to come back to the table, for that financial reason of needing to get in as much money as possible, especially with it being difficult to sell Lukaku at the moment. They need to get a fair chunk of money in now before that end of June cut-off.
And that's where Manchester United have played a blinder, really, because they've had this tag of overpaying for so many players over the last few years, but they've gone to what they feel Mason's value is, and they've just stopped and gone, well, we'll leave it. And it's almost a little bit of a game of poker between Chelsea and Manchester United, and then Chelsea have had to go back to them and say, OK, fine, we'll talk, let's do the deal.
You talk about them playing a blinder, but if United have reportedly 100 mil to spend, they've now spent 60 million on Mason Mount, and we know they want to strengthen in other areas as well. It doesn't leave a lot, does it?
No, but they'll be banking on selling some players as well and raising some capital in that way. But yeah, Manchester United still very much in the market to make signings over the course of this summer. Their key target now is a number 9. They want a striker to play right through the middle, someone who can deliver goals as Marcus Rashford did last season. So that is one area of focus for Erik ten Hag and his backroom team. They've also been looking at right centre-backs. Kim Min-jae was someone that they had been linked with in the early stages of this summer's transfer window, but of course we know that he's no longer going to be heading to Old Trafford because he looks likely to head to Bayern Munich. And of course there is a little bit of a situation with regards to the goalkeeper as well. David De Gea is out of contract. It expires tomorrow. And of course he's been there for in excess of 10 years. But it's been described to us as in the balance as to what's happening with David De Gea. Manchester United are actively seeking potential alternatives. There's an interest in the Inter Milan goalkeeper Andre Onana as well, who of course worked with Erik ten Hag at Ajax. So yeah, goalkeeper, striker, right-sided centre-back, they're the key priority areas. There's a passing interest in Moises Caicedo as well, but that looks to be some way down the line. And like you rightly say, Emma, they've got to be clever with the finances they have.
Given that Andre Onana worked with Erik ten Hag at Ajax, it therefore seems a fairly foolish question to think, does he fit into the style? Because clearly he does.
Yeah, I mean, he needs a goalkeeper that can play with his feet. I mean, that's pretty clear. And there are not many better at that than Onana. And he's reinflated his reputation over the last year or so since going to Inter, because you have to remember when he was at Ajax, he had that drugs ban that meant he sat out for quite a long while, and then his contract was running out, so Ten Hag wasn't allowed to put him in the team. So his last year and a half at Ajax wasn't very happy at all. At one point, he was very close to going to Lyon and playing for another old coach there, Peter Bosz, for, 4 or 5 million. And yet he stuck it out and ended up going to Inter. He stuck with that sense of, I deserve to be playing for an enormous club. And he went and proved it in the Champions League last season. He was absolutely fantastic. If you look how many Premier League clubs have been interested in him. You know, you talked there, Mark, about Manchester United having to be sensible, and Emma was saying, you know, there's only so much in the pot. Maybe that will change as the summer goes on. Remember, we've still got a long time to go. We've got a couple of months to go. But I think they need to get this goalkeeper nailed early on. And, of course, the fact that Chelsea can't really do anything at the moment. They might be able to do something in a month. So get him now. I think that's the clear thing. They want to get Onana. I know Ten Hag is really, really anxious to get Onana over the line as quickly as possible.
It's interesting, isn't it, when you look at goalkeepers and the importance of the whole package rather than just being a shot stopper, because David De Gea is an incredible one of those. And maybe you can draw the parallel with Manchester City, where Pep Guardiola comes in and Joe Hart is sidelined and arguably get an inferior keeper, but one that fits what he wants to do.
But I think we've seen that we saw the opening interview, really impressive opening interview with Guillermo Vicario at Tottenham, and his vision of the game. I think that's what will have sold Tottenham on him. You know, not just that he's a young goalkeeper on the way up, just been called up to Roberto Mancini's Italy squad, not played yet, but you would think that will be in the post, especially with Donnarumma having a very up and down season last year with PSG. You'd think there would be some scope for competition in there, particularly if he does well in the Premier League. But Tottenham, in that sort of rebuilding phase, is almost like the goalkeeper is the key piece of that, and maybe that could be the same for Manchester United. Now, Manchester United are in a different point. They don't need to completely rebuild. I wouldn't say to the same extent that Tottenham need to and are starting to do by getting Maddison in. But in a way, getting Vicario in is almost as important as Maddison, because Tottenham had so many defensive problems last year. Hugo Lloris didn't have his best season. There was the sense that he was declining a little bit. They had a lot of personnel issues with that back 4/back 5 that they really need to sort out as well. And it feels like Vicario is them getting young and them having an idea on how they want to play, which is exactly what Ange Postecoglou has.
Just want to ask you one more on United before we move on to Arsenal. Mark mentioned the number 9 there and the kind of need to bring in a number 9. Throughout a lot of the season, it was talk about Harry Kane, it was talk about Victor Osimhen. Both of those have sort of fallen away now. For you, who watches a hell of a lot of football across Europe, who do United go for now, and who would fit in at that United team?
It's a tough question, Emma, because the guys who they really want are so expensive. And, you know, I think that's putting off a lot of Premier League clubs at the moment. You look at Victor Osimhen and you look syndicate, he would be a great option for a lot of Premier League clubs. But they're in a good position because they know they're selling Kim Min-jae. They can hold on to Aussie men. They can hold on to Kvaratskhelia. It's not going to be a bargain basement sale. And Aurelio De Laurentiis, I've heard it suggested in Italy that he's like Italian Daniel Levy, in that he wants to drive this really hard bargain with extra drama, of course, from his cinematic background. So that's going to be really hard to do. I just wonder, with United, do they get someone who's not their dream striker this summer, but someone who can take a bit of the pressure off Rashford, who maybe they will use more and more as a centre forward?
Rasmus Højlund?
He's not going to be cheap. Again, I think that's an issue. And I think a couple of Premier League clubs have missed a trick in not going for Marcus Thuram. Now, I know there's no such thing as a free signing. A free signing is not really a free signing. And his signing on fee put off a couple of clubs. But I think you look at someone like him who you know can do the work in those wide areas, who's played as a central striker for the last year very successfully, had a great World Cup as well, and you don't have to pay a transfer fee for. I mean, Tottenham were in for him at one point and it didn't happen because he still had contract to go at Borussia Mönchengladbach. I think Inter have made a great pick up there.
OK, we will move from Manchester United on to Arsenal, I think, and they've agreed to spend a club record £105 million to sign the West Ham captain Declan Rice.
Yeah, there are still parts of the deal to be worked out with West Ham. So for the very latest, we can go to the Emirates now and join James Green. James, good to see you. Just how close is Rice to becoming an Arsenal player?
Good evening, Emma. Close, but not quite there just yet. I know a lot of Arsenal fans were pretty excited when news broke yesterday that the fee had been agreed, the £105 million, which would be a club record, smashing and eclipsing that of the fee they paid for Nicolas Pepe back in 2019. But we do understand negotiations between the two clubs are ongoing, and that's regards the structure of that deal. Now, both parties are willing to negotiate. There's a willingness to get this deal over the line, but it's just going to take a little bit more time for these little issues to be ironed out over whether the deal's made over the money up front is 2 years, 3 years, 4 years, and so on. But once that's been agreed, personal terms can be ticked off, a medical can be completed, and then Arsenal fans could expect to see a 24-year-old Declan Rice, who's just lifted a European trophy with West Ham, took over the captaincy from Mark Noble last season, 41 England caps, and ever present at the World Cup and European Championships under Gareth Southgate, putting on that Arsenal shirt. But a little bit of patience required, still a little bit of a way to go, but it is edging closer and closer to being completed.
So Declan Rice is nearly there. James, what about Jurrien Timber of Ajax?
Similar story, Rob. This one looks like it's edging closer as well. Talks are very positive between the two parties, and we have one source who's told us that this deal is edging closer to being completed. Talks about the fee paid for the Netherlands international defender, someone that Mikel Arteta's been very keen to bring on. And if you think about it, if Arsenal can get this one over the line, get Declan Rice over the line, I know it's a lot of money, over £200 million would have been spent on this transfer window, but they brought in the likes of Kai Havertz as well. That's a real signal of intent of what Arsenal are looking to do moving forward. They're not resting on their laurels of what happened last season. They're pushing on into next season, playing Champions League football the first time in 7 seasons here at the Emirates. They're excited to do that. The fans are getting excited now, but that one is edging closer. Declan Rice is edging closer, and it's becoming a very exciting transfer window for Arsenal fans.
Yeah, isn't it just? James, thank you. Andy, I'll just pick up on Timber. A lot of Arsenal fans we've heard from over the last couple of days very excited about Declan Rice. How excited should they be about Jurrien Timber?
I think it'll be really good for them. Bear in mind that Manchester United wanted to sign him last summer. They couldn't get the fee agreed. He did, I guess you would say, the right thing by the club and stayed for an extra year. And he's going to make them a lot of money this year. He's capable. He's quick, he's going to get better. And I think when you look at the fact they brought in Kivior as well, and the fact that now he's had 6 months to settle, what Arsenal don't want to be is in the position they were in the last quarter of last season, where they're without Saliba and all of a sudden they're in big trouble at the back.
Killed them, didn't it?
Yeah, it made a massive difference to them, Rob. So I think that sense of cover as well, they're looking to sort of cover those angles that they didn't have covered in the second part of last season.
What about Havertz then? He's a very divisive figure, and a lot of times it's very easy to pick up on what he can't do. But I remember watching him in the Bundesliga for Leverkusen and thinking this guy's going to be a world beater. Can Mikel Arteta make him a world beater?
Yeah, I think he can. The ability's there, and we've seen it in flashes at Chelsea. I think the issue was when he arrived straight away, Frank Lampard didn't really know what to do with him. And Frank Lampard actually did a terrific job in his first season at Chelsea. That became a completely different job in his second season, which kind of did for him in that first spell, really. And Havertz was one of the major problems, because you've got a player who cost an awful lot of money, who they want to try and build the team around, and Lampard can't really work him out, and he can't really work Lampard out, which I think made it quite difficult for him to adapt to the Premier League. I think with Havertz, it was always tempting to think he's going to be a really good centre-forward at some point. In fact, there's still a little bit in my head, even though Chelsea fans tell me all the time he's not a centre-forward, there's still a little
he's
voice
not
in
a
my...
centre-forward.
You're not going to get rid of that voice in my head that says he can be. I mean, he's a guy who can score headers on the penalty spot, he's a good finisher, he uses his body well. Can he do it on a consistent basis? We've seen him do it for Leverkusen, but I think you look at Chelsea, they've had, give or take Drogba and early Diego Costa, they've wrecked some really good centre forwards over the years. So I don't think the fact that Havertz hasn't really developed in that position is that much of a surprise. But I think that versatility, the fact that you can use him a little bit further back as well. Look, there's other players he can play off, and I think it'd be interesting to see how they do use him. I think they will use him at centre forward a bit, but they will probably end up using him in a sort of 10 as well.
Yeah.
Okay.
Mark, you've obviously been across the Declan Rice move over the past few days. For Arsenal, I mean, it looks like they're getting their business done early in the window. Do you feel like they've targeted certain players and said, well, ultimately, if we had these players last season, we would have won the Premier League. This is why we're going so hard for some of these players this transfer window.
I think you're seeing some really good targeted work by Mikel Arteta and Arsenal. They've clearly got a plan which they are executing almost to perfection. Obviously, there's the Kai Havertz deal, as we've spoken about, that got confirmed at 8 o'clock last night. They're getting closer to Declan Rice as well. And there's some talk and movement on the Urian Timber thing. So you've got 3 players that are going to cost in excess of £200 million. But they're 3 key targets for each of those positions that they're looking to strengthen. And I think, without question, that will make Arsenal much better next season. So they're going out, they're spending a lot of money. They're obviously banking on the fact that they're going to be able to sell some players as well and make that net spend over the course of this summer much smaller than it appears to be right now. But I think you can only be impressed by the fact that they have gone out, got the players they want, and they are strengthening the squad in the way that the manager wants. He's being backed by the owners and the board. Edu has done some fantastic work as well, and I think this could be, Arsenal fans will be really excited by what's happening in the early stages of this transfer window.
OK, we'll take a quick breather so me and Andy can argue about whether Kai Havertz is centre forward or not. There's also news of Dominic Solanke to come, and the latest on a club record deal at Aston Villa as well.
Yeah, we're also going to have news on Tottenham's search for a centre-back, and we're going to hear from their new midfielder, James Maddison.
Welcome back to the Transfer Show. Mark McAdam and Andy Brassel are with us this evening. Will Dominic Solanke be with us in the Premier League in the coming weeks and months? Certainly been, or seemed to have been, Andy, on a lot of teams' radars.
And he should be, and he should have been for a while. Solanke is a really good player. He's very Prem ready, I think you can say. Box to box, gets through tons of work, incredible athlete, great technique, can create goals, can score goals, loves a shot from outside the box, and loves to take responsibility to pull a team forward. I think both clubs who have been linked with him, Newcastle and Liverpool, are both decent fits for him. I think you look at how more athletic Newcastle have become under Eddie Howe, and that's something that could really work. I think he would add something. If you look at what Joe Willock does, arguably Szoboszlai does that and has the potential to do that at a higher standard and certainly score more goals. And Liverpool were lacking that sort of dynamism in midfield last season. So I think Leipzig are in a difficult spot at the moment because obviously they've just sold Christopher Nkunku to Chelsea. There is significant interest from Manchester City in Joško Gvardiol. And the price that was set for Gvardiol at the start of the summer, or going back actually into spring, was around the €100 million mark, with Leipzig thinking no one's going to come anywhere near that. Now you've got a team who are prepared to come somewhere near that in Manchester City. And he's obviously very keen to go there. We heard Mateo Kovacic talking the other day about how it's a dream for a player. I don't think he's alone in thinking that. And I think you look at, we just look at Ilkay Gundogan. You look at, in his 7 years, what he's become as a player. And I think players look at him and think, a bit of coaching under Guardiola, what could I become? I could become a footballer beyond my wildest dreams.
Winning the treble helps as well.
I think it definitely does, because you don't feel like it's a pinnacle for Manchester City. You feel like it's the start of something, and you'll be going on to do it again and again and again in the Champions League. Now they've broken that duck. So I think Leipzig are in this position because Szoboszlai has this clause in his contract around the €70 million mark, but that only lasts until the end of June. So I suspect that his agents are trying to give people a push and saying, you're either going to have to pay a lot more for him when it gets to July, or Leipzig will simply refuse to do business. Because if they've lost Nkunku, who, if you know how they're going to replace him, please tell me, because they're not going to be able to replace him with one player. He did so many different things for them. They lose their best defender in Gvardiol, because I think that's more likely to happen than not. If they lose Szoboszlai as well...
I read something today saying that the plan was at Leipzig that they didn't want to go through the summer with all of them gone.
Well, I mean, they're completely stuck if they lose those. They're on an upward trajectory. They've got a great coach in Marco Rosa. They're in a position where they didn't finish that far off the top of the Bundesliga last season. They've won the DFB Pokal, the German Cup, 2 years in a row. They're getting consistently in the Champions League. And they're in a bit of a quandary because, on one hand, you want to say, if you come to us, you're in a shop window to get to the elite level, to get to Chelsea, to get to United, to get to Barcelona, wherever else. But on the other hand, if they lose all those players in the same summer, your momentum is gone, and it's a full-on rebuild.
Yeah. Just to move it on to Liverpool then, because they are, like Andy said, one of the clubs interested in Szoboszlai. I think there's this massive assumption, because of how Liverpool ended up doing last season and the players that they've lost this summer, that there's going to be a whole revamp at Liverpool.
Well, it's been described to us as potentially the biggest revamp of that midfield since Jurgen Klopp went into the football club. They're going to have to reinvigorate it, revamp it, and reintroduce some new faces and perhaps a little bit more athleticism, because they've lost a number of players. James Milner has gone, Alex Oxlade-Chamberlain has gone. I know they've signed Alexis McAllister, but this is perhaps the area that Liverpool fans will say needs the most amount of work in this window. But the problem for Jurgen Klopp is they're working under really tough financial parameters, which potentially rules them out of doing the deal for Szoboszlai. He has got that release clause, which expires tomorrow. The agent clearly wants to get him out in the window. But how many of these big deals can you get done in 24 hours? I don't think too many, so I don't anticipate him leaving. But he's certainly been on Liverpool's radar, and he's been monitored by a number of Premier League sides. But whether he's quite ready to make that jump, you perhaps could answer that question a little bit better. But he's certainly been on the agenda for a number of clubs as they've watched his development.
Yeah, you know, when you see really good Liverpool absolutely monstering teams in the first half hour at Anfield, you can see him leading that. I think that's a really clear fit. You could see him, as I said, pulling the team forward, driving the team forward, being really aggressive and positive. I think he'd be a great fit for Liverpool. But as I said before, I think he'd be a great fit for Newcastle as well. I'd just love to see him in the Premier League, to be perfectly honest. But someone better get on their bike if they want to do it, right?
Just to come back to Liverpool midfield options, there's been a lot of players linked with him in that midfield position, and I think, you know, there were times last season where people said, oh, my God, Liverpool need to sign 43 new midfielders. Barella, Gravenberch, Kefren Turam, Manu Kone. If you could say one of those four would be the best fit for what you want. What do you call a monster Liverpool a second? So who else would fit that bill of being the team that could sort of beast clubs in the first half an hour.
Kefren Thuram's the one. I think you look, as Mark was saying, that lack of athleticism in midfield really did them last season. And it exposed the defence a little bit. We heard a lot of criticism of Virgil van Dijk. We heard, when's he going to get his best level of form back? It sort of reminded me a little bit of, you go back to when Xabi Alonso left Liverpool, and Jamie Carragher didn't start the last season particularly well. Sorry, Jamie. But I think...
Hope you're enjoying your last appearance on Sky Sports, Andy.
Part of that was you take Xabi Alonso away and, it takes away a layer of protection for him. And, he maybe spends more time on the ball than he wants to. He's got to construct the game a little bit more. And I think you look at Fabinho and his drop-off in form. That exposes Van Dijk last season. Now, if you can get in Kefren Thuram, who covers a ton of ground, is going to get even better than he already is. I think that is an obvious signing. I think Manu Kone is a bit more projecty, whereas I think he's someone who will get better over a number of seasons and will end up being a very, very good player. We've already seen in isolation Manu Kone be very good. Kefren Thuram is a lot more consistent, already getting into the French squad. I think he's the one.
Just a very quick point. Andy is talking about issues with Liverpool's defence, issues with Liverpool in midfield. How much does Trent Alexander-Arnold complicate the problem? Because we've seen him in such a brilliant impact as a midfielder. Could he be a midfielder rather than a right-back next season?
I was going to say, you say cause a problem. Could he solve the problem?
Yeah, a good problem, I mean.
Yeah, so obviously I was lucky enough to be at Old Trafford last week when England played against North Macedonia, and in Malta on the Friday night, where obviously when you stood outside the Qatari Stadium and the team sheet comes through and you see Trent Alexander-Arnold with a number 10, it sort of raises your eyebrows and you think, OK, this is interesting. We know he can play in midfield for Liverpool, but this number 10 role slightly different, certainly for England. But he was absolutely superb. Everything that you'd want a number 10 to do, he did. And he has the technical ability as well to pick out those passes, to whip balls into the box. He's got a really good awareness. He needs to improve on his back-to-play work, but he definitely would offer something very different to Liverpool. And one thing that we saw against Malta is he knows how to hit the ball and he knows how to strike it properly.
So, Mark, is that your play if you're Liverpool? Say you look at an elite right-back out there. Say you go, Benjamin Pavard, got a year left on his deal at Bayern. Let's make him an offer. And we move Trent Alexander-Arnold into midfield.
Absolutely. And I think what happens is you've got the versatility of knowing you've got a player that can play multiple roles there. And when you're a Liverpool side, of course, they're not playing in the Champions League next season, but they've still got European football. And they're going to have games thick and fast. They're going to get to the latter stages of domestic cup competitions. They're going to play 50-plus games. Yeah. They're going to need players that can play in multiple positions. And I think Trent playing in that role would be brilliant for Jurgen Klopp, but he certainly solves an issue that might be there if they don't have the funds. Because, as you know, going and buying a number 10 might cost you 50 to 80 million. Yeah. Going and buying a right-back might cost you 20 or 30.
Especially a right-back who can play centre-half as well. I mean, it solves a multitude of problems, arguably. Yeah.
You see it with so many modern players. They play in multiple positions, and it gives a manager an extra option, extra dimension, which could be so important. So, yeah, I think that could be an interesting one to watch for Liverpool, certainly.
Interesting summer for Liverpool. Let's move on to another club that have got European football next season. Big news at Aston Villa. Bring us up to date with what's happening there.
Yes, significant news that came to us here at Sky Sports this afternoon with regards to their pursuit of the 26-year-old centre-back at Villarreal, Pau Torres. Now, Aston Villa are in advanced talks with Villarreal over a signing. He's entering the last year of his deal. He has a release clause, which is 70 million euros. However, we think Aston Villa have been a little bit creative and they've been able to negotiate a deal because the fact that he's going into the last year of his deal for a fee of around £45 million. He was a part of the Spain World Cup squad, just the one appearance in Qatar, played 39 times for Villarreal last season. And, of course, significantly, the manager knows him, having worked with him before. And I think that's one of the key things. The other key thing with regards to this is Monchi, who is going in to Aston Villa, having spent a number of years at Sevilla, went across to Roma, went back to Sevilla. He's going in to work alongside Unai Emery with regards to developing players, finding players, working as a director of football, head of football operations, whatever role you want to title him as. But he's clearly been a big factor in this deal as well. So I think the fact that Aston Villa are getting a really highly thought of left-sided centre-back, so he's going to put Tyrone Mings under pressure as well for that role, but also a player that is very, very well thought of and I'm guessing someone you know quite well, having watched him as well.
Yeah, and talking of the lefties, Diego Carlos is on the way back as well.
Yeah.
At some point, who Villa have seen, unfortunately, very little of so far. Pau Torres needs this move, I think, because you go back a couple of years, Real Madrid wanted him, couldn't afford him because of that huge clause that you were talking about, and obviously they were making some cutbacks at the time as well. So because of that, I feel, because there's not really been the market for him, his game's not really moved on in the past year and a half or so. He could have developed a little bit more quickly, and we would have expected him to develop a little bit more quickly than he has done, because he's been good for Spain largely. He's just one of those players. He's got such an incredible level of comfort on the ball that occasionally there's a huge error in there. He's almost a little bit too casual sometimes. It's that sort of fear that the British have of ball-playing centre-backs, really, isn't it? But, you know, I think if you look at his strength, his speed, his poise, he can turn into something really good. I think he's a player, if you even go back a year, Villa are not able to get him. But now I think the fact that there's that feeling they're really pulling in the right direction under Emery, the pull of Monchi that you talked about, even though he's not had great success in the transfer market with Sevilla in the last year and a half. And this is a big window for Monchi, I think, to really get right and establish himself in his new job. It could work out well for Villa.
And Aston Villa, of course, Youri Tielemans to be confirmed on July the 1st as well. So that will be another addition to that squad, which takes that squad to a different place. They're certainly looking ahead and up the table as opposed to behind them.
But to me, the Torres arrival, it sort of smacks of the power of the Premier League, whether it be financially, exposure-wise, but to get from Villa where they were, to get Emery in as their manager when they were not too far above the relegation zone. You would say the same with Wolves, to get someone like Lopetegui to come in when they were in a relegation battle. It tells you the drag that it has for the world's top players, but also the world's top coaches.
Yeah, 100%. I would agree with that. And I think Emery's on record as saying that. He says, I've got nothing to prove in the Premier League. I just want to coach there again, because it's the ultimate for a coach. And I think that is the thing with the Premier League. If you look at the top end of it, in the last 3 years or so, it's become a coaches' league. You know, the best coaches in the world have come here. I think it's made an absolutely enormous difference. And we can just see Emery's made an enormous difference to Aston Villa as well.
Yeah. Right, should we take another little breather?
If you say so,
yeah, I think we should, yeah. We're going to look at Tottenham's revamp next, and there is plenty more on Declan Rice and Mason Mount as both players close in on moves. Hi there, welcome back. Right, we're going to talk about Tottenham targets in just a moment, but first, James Maddison completed his move to Spurs yesterday for a fee of £40 million, and today he explained why Tottenham is the right place for him.
I feel like I've got a good understanding of Tottenham Hotspur Football Club, and now I'm a part of it, and I've got this lovely white shirt on, the iconic Tottenham shirt, and it feels brilliant, and I'm ready to go. Come on, you Spurs. He said, well, whether you come or not, you're going to see a completely different Spurs team under me. And it kind of stuck with me that he said that, and that's the self-belief that I have in myself. I spoke to Daniel, and they both spoke very highly of everything about the club, about me, and things like that are so important, and building a good relationship with him, with Daniel, speaking to other players. Obviously, I know a lot of the lads anyway, and like you said, played against for many years. So, and Christian was one of my favourite players, like growing up when I was in the low leagues especially, and he was in hot form at Tottenham. Iconic number 23, Ericsson, was just something that would produce quality moments for this football club, and to swap shirts with a player like that, of that ilk, was very special to me. No, I absolutely love it.
It's like you, Mark, permanently in front of the mirror, isn't he, James Maddison?
In the makeup room. Yeah.
He gives a good interview, does James. He likes his new white shirt. Will Harry Kane be wearing the same shirt next season?
I think so, but there has been a lot of talk about Harry Kane. It wouldn't be a summer without talking about Harry Kane, let's be honest. But he's going into the final year of that bumper deal he signed a number of years ago. And our colleagues in Sky Germany have been leading the way with this story, because what they've been reporting is that Bayern Munich expressed an interest verbally to Tottenham with regards to signing Harry Kane. That was rebuffed The latest information we had yesterday was that they were preparing a more formal offer in writing, believed to be around 70 million euros. They've been told that Harry Kane would be open to moving to Bayern Munich and, of course, taking his young family to Munich. However, our information has been that so far no offers have come in and Tottenham are not welcoming any offers as far as they're concerned. Harry Kane is very much a part of the plan under Ange Postecoglou, and he will be there next season scoring hopefully another 30 Premier League goals. So, yeah, Sky Germany, very, very close relationship with Bayern Munich. They've been across this story, but it's going to be an interesting one to see how it develops. I don't think Harry Kane will be leaving, and I think he will be playing with James Maddison next season.
That's going to be interesting, isn't it? What's your take on Kane to Bayern?
Presumably that's why Maddison set the ground for how much he likes the number 23, because he won't be getting the 10 next season. I think something has really changed between Bayern and Harry Kane. And what's changed is the fact that he's expressed an openness to it. Because before, it's not a new interest in Harry Kane. They've been interested in him for a long time now. But this is the first time they've had some encouragement back. And I think you combine that with the fact that there's a year left of his contract. It means Tottenham have got a decision to make. Because if he's not giving any feelers that he's going to sign a new contract, I mean, Ange Postecoglou is a coach that I really like, and Maddison's a signing that I really like. They're going to have to do an extraordinary amount to convince Kane that they're going to be consistently in the Champions League going forward. I mean, I think they'll do very, very well to make the Champions League next season, but if we're talking about consistently making it, I think if you're Harry Kane, you're at that age now with a year left in your contract, you're 29, you're thinking, I'm going to sign my last major contract in my prime. It's not about the money, it's about the legacy, isn't it? You've got to think, what do I want my legacy to look like? And if you think, he's already scored a truckload of goals in the Premier League, broken the Spurs record, broken the England record, what's next? Trophies. And the opportunity to consistently have a go at the Champions League, I suspect that's what has made his nose perk up a little bit. So how far Bayern are interested in pushing that, I think, is really the question. And does it get to a point where Levy's going to say, if he's not going to sign again, what is a figure too big for us to turn down?
It's interesting because you have that dilemma. Daniel Levy now has that, should an offer come in. Getting into the top four in the Champions League is worth between 50 and 60 million pounds minimum. Without Harry Kane, there's no chance that Tottenham will get into the top four. So you take the money and sell him, but you lose out on the Champions League. You keep him and he scores the goals that you expect him to score. You've got a much better chance of getting in the Champions League. So financially, it's almost, it's the same.
Well, you don't sell him for 70, do you? I think if it's getting up towards £100 million, I think then you've got a decision to make. And I think, we've talked about it with Mason Mount, haven't we? You can say he's only got a year left in his contract. Guy's the England captain, record goal scorer. He's a guarantee of goals. And everyone, the world and his wife, knows that Bayern need that centre-forward. They need that world-class centre-forward. Now, of course, it's been said in Italy today that they're going to make another approach for Victor Osimhen. They can't afford him. If they're being asked for 180 million for Victor Osimhen, they're not going to say to Spurs, well, we're not going to go above 70 million for Kane. We're going to try and talk Napoli down with, as we said, the Italian Daniel Levy. It's not going to happen. So that is a deal that's very, very difficult to make happen, unless Osimhen, who's got, I think, a more sort of optimistic relationship with Napoli as far as the future goes, he's much more open to a future with Napoli than Kane appears to be with Spurs at the moment. Kane is definitely keeping his options open. There's no doubt about that. So this might play out a little bit differently to the City thing because, of course, this time he's got the contract on his side, which he didn't before.
One of the problems with Tottenham is that sort of Kane just kept bailing them out last season because there were problems elsewhere in the pitch. Defensively, they just couldn't keep clean sheets. So we're tightish for time. You're going to tell me about Mickey van der Veen and you're going to tell me about Edmund Topsoba. Go.
Yes, so that's a player that they're interested in. Tottenham still looking to make additions in this window, and he certainly would tick the boxes of Ange Postecoglou and the type of player that he'd like to bring into North London.
They need pace in that defence, and both of these players are potentially going to give that. I would rather have Van der Ven, if I'm being honest. He's younger. He was absolutely terrific last season, became the leader of a good Wolfsburg defence, even though it had a pretty poor end to the season. It's a cheaper option for Spurs, which I know will appeal to them as well. And the way that Leverkusen play it's hard to tell exactly how good Tapsoba is. We know he's a good defender. Do we know he's a defender who could be a difference maker for Tottenham? I'm not as convinced as I would be with Van der Ven, who I think is a player who can get better and better.
Right, there is absolutely loads to get through, isn't there? More on Chelsea on the way, plus news on a possible Declan Rice replacement at West Ham. That's coming up next. Hi there, welcome back to the Transfer Show. Right, we're going to focus on Newcastle now. And Mark, Sandro Tonali is a player that we've been talking about throughout the window. How close is his move to the northeast?
It's getting closer. 99.9% completed. Of course, the Italy under-21 side were knocked out of the Euros last night against Norway. They lost 1-0 and he was of course the captain. So now that his international duty is coming to an end, you'd imagine Newcastle will accelerate the finer stages of getting this deal completed. So yeah, just a matter of time before Eddie Howe gets his first signing of this window. His number one target, a midfield player who he thinks can play in multiple positions as a 6 or an 8, so he brings that versatility. And this is a key signing. Newcastle don't have a huge pot of money to spend over the course of this summer. However, £55 million for a player like Sandro Tonali at his age, who was so significant in Serie A last season, is going to be a big start and a big boost to Newcastle in this window.
West Ham might feel they have a huge pot of money to spend soon and a big Declan Rice-shaped hole in their midfield. Is Edson Alvarez the man to fill it?
Well, he could be, and good news for West Ham potentially today with sources in Germany saying that the move to Borussia Dortmund has fallen through, because it looked as if Alvarez was going there. They've, of course, got a little bit of cash to spend themselves post Jude Bellingham. But the sense was it was just getting a little bit too expensive. They agreed terms with Alvarez a few weeks back, and he was very much hoping to go to Borussia Dortmund. His agents had some talks with West Ham already, but Dortmund was his preferred option. But what's happened now, because it's got a bit expensive, and because in the second half of last season, Emre Can was so brilliant. So they were looking at his contract as a millstone for quite a long time. It runs out in 2024. They're now looking to extend it, and he's open to accepting reduced terms as well, as Marco Reus and Mats Hummels, two of the other experienced players in the squad, have done. So that leaves West Ham, I think, with a clear run at Alvarez. And he's had two big moves fall through. Of course, he thought he was going to Chelsea on deadline day last summer, and then he's had this move fall through. So he'd be super eager to prove himself in the Premier League, and he's become really, really good for Ajax. Right, we've got a couple of minutes before we're going to get to another break. Let's just talk about Chelsea for a minute. We've been talking a lot about outgoings, a lot about Mason Mount this hour. Going to throw some names at you and tell us where we're at. Romelu Lukaku is the first one.
Yeah, so Romelu Lukaku, of course, spent last season on loan at Inter Milan. Chelsea have all but ruled out the opportunity for him to go back on loan. They're not interested in any loan deals. It would be a permanent transfer should Romelu Lukaku leave Chelsea again. So he has actually turned down a huge offer, £1 million a week, to join a Saudi Pro League side. So, he wants to stay in Europe. He wants to carry on playing European football. It doesn't look like it's going to be at Stamford Bridge, but this is certainly one player to monitor over the next few weeks and months. Ziyech? Yeah, he's headed out the door, isn't he? He's gone, so that's another player that they don't have to worry about. In fact, when you look at Chelsea over the course of this summer so far, they've actually raised a significant amount of money in player sales. Over £200 million worth. Take a look at that. That tells you how good their business has been. Of course, there's a few asterisks there of players that have not yet completed the deal, but they have raised £243.5 million, give or take a few quid. They've sold a number of players to the Saudi Pro League. But of course, everyone talks about last summer in January and their £600 million worth of spending. They've counteracted that this summer so far by raising a huge sum of cash. So it just goes to show Arsenal spending big money. If they get the player sales right, then of course it will balance out quite nicely for FFP. One name on that list that we were just going to talk about, of course, he's just gone to AC Milan, Ruben Loftus-Cheek, another deal worth just under €20 million, about £18.5 million. Medical today. Expecting confirmation on that one tomorrow.
Just very quickly, in 20 seconds, how much do you think that this Saudi assault on signing players might change the European market?
I think it already has to a certain extent. You know, I think Real Madrid thought they were keeping Benzema as little as 2 months ago, and then they were blown out of the water. If it can happen to Real Madrid, it can happen to anyone and everyone.
All right, we shall leave it there. Andy, thank you very much indeed. Mark, thank you as well. Lots more to come on Sky Sports News over the course of the evening. Once we are done with Andy and Mark, we will let you know what's happened on day 2 of the second Ashes test between England and Australia at Lord's. Highlights from what's happened and also reaction from both camps as well. We'll see you in a couple of minutes' time.